Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our Star Wars Critters panel. It's going to be a look at the life forms of the Star Wars galaxy. I'm S.T. Bende. I'm the author of the Star Wars Bestiary, which I got to create alongside my really good friend and amazingly talented artist, Earyn McGee. And I am joined on stage by some truly incredible real-world scientists and animal enthusiasts who just so happen to be Star Wars fans, who are here to give us some insight into their favorite galactic creatures and to offer some context as to how these magical beasts might just share some features with creatures we can find in a galaxy not so far, far away. So scientists, animal enthusiasts, and Star Wars fans, would you kindly introduce yourselves?
Yes, thank you, S.T. I'm Melissa Miller. I am a scientist at Scripps Oceanography down in San Diego. I also am a science writer, and I have written for Star Wars Insider magazine, which is how I first got connected with S.T. here. And ecologist by nature, I guess, but we'll get into all that. Please.
Hi, my name is James Floyd, and I'm an animal enthusiast and Star Wars fan. I'm the author of Star Wars crossword puzzles and other word games from a galaxy far, far away. And Melissa and I run a podcast called Star Warsologies, where we discuss science and Star Wars. And every time we have a different guest expert come on, and we talk about how their field connects with Star Wars. And we've talked about everything from psychology to food science, figure out how to make blue food. All kinds of stuff. So we're really excited, and creatures are one of our favorite things to talk about.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Earyn McGee, and I am a herpetologist and science communicator. I'm also the creator of #FindThatLizard, which is an online resource to teach people about lizards, ecology, and social justice. And I'm also the creator of the Find That Lizard Scholarship, which supports girls, women, and gender nonconforming people interested in herpetology.
Hi everybody, I'm Sam Wynns. I'm a conservation biologist that works in public lands here in California. That means national parks, state parks, county parks, and city parks. I'm also the executive director of the Ecologic Institute, which is about bringing underserved youth into STEM fields and giving them the support that they need to be successful in these careers.
Hello, my name is Randy. I am a current PhD student at UCLA, and I am a geochemist, so I study extinct animals and the environments that they lived in by analyzing the chemical composition of fossils that they leave behind.
My name is Gord. I'm a Gord.
I'm S.T. Bende. I'm a lifelong fan of all creatures great and small, but definitely not spiders in our galaxy, or Wishox, and the one that's farther away. I'm not a scientist, but I got to play one in the Bestiary, so I'm really excited to get to sit up here and ask these folks all kinds of questions. I feel so bad for Randy. I have been accosting our dinosaur experts with questions for as long as I found out there were dinosaur experts here. During the panel, you are going to hear us all reference Terrell Whitlatch's amazing The Wildlife of Star Wars, a Field Guide. So this book was a huge inspiration for Eris and I, both artistically and in creating our book. So it was really important to both of us to incorporate as much of it into our book as we possibly could. So a lot of the data that we got for the animals in our bestiary originated in Terrell's book. The tricky thing was, because that book was written prior to the 2015 incorporation of Lucasfilm to the Disney family, it wasn't technically canon anymore. So it meant a lot to us to get to bring it into a more, into a book that they were willing to recognize in the current era. And so we were able to just take everything that Terrell had made that we could and just put it in here and make it all Disney and all Lucasfilm. So we worked with an amazing editor named Sammy Holland, and she let me turn this book in as kind of a rainbow manuscript so that she would know exactly what level of information she was getting when I wrote it. So if it was a canon source from something written post-2015 or a film or a TV show or Rebels, my little board friend, that information went into the manuscript in black. And then if it came from Terrell's book, I wrote that in purple, I believe. If the information came from an earth animal that bore a passing resemblance to a Star Wars creature, so a cetacean trait that I felt like maybe a purple would incorporate, that went in blue. And then anything I made up was red. So if we didn't have information on weight or height, or if it was an herbivore, or something that you felt like you really would need to know in a text about animals, but we didn't have access to that information, it was read so that they could let me know, no, that is very, very wrong, or sure, we can absolutely put that into the book. So that little rainbow colored manuscript became this tome that Earyn illustrated so beautifully, and is now my favorite book that I've gotten to work on to date. Don't tell the books. So, okay, so let's dive into our panel. We are using the Star Wars Bestiary to explore the creatures of the Star Wars galaxy through the lens of real-world science. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about my amazing friend, our artist on the Bestiary, Earyn McGee. Now, she couldn't be with us today because she does live in a galaxy far, far away from LA, but she is one of my all-time favorite collaborators and the most talented artist that I know. She is an award-winning traditional artist and illustrator who creates picture books, gallery art, and sculptures. Storytelling is an essential part of her artwork, and she strives to lure in her spectators by making them feel a connection to her work and opening a gateway to their imagination. She is the creator of the original world, Berries of the Fault Lines, which is so beautiful. And she's the artist behind both the Dark Crystal Bestiary and the Labyrinth Bestiary, which I got to work on with her, and that was, oh, you guys. She would send in files, and I would look at them, and I would occasionally fall over, and then I learned if you see the email with her name, you just sit down, and then you open the file. And that was doubly so for this one. Our Earyn takes her inspiration from European folklore, mythology, fairy tales, ghost stories, and anything from tombstones to Victorian photographs to popular movies and music. She is kind and brilliant and so incredibly talented, and I'm so thankful that we got to have her create these creatures for us for our bestiary. So, let's dive into our first creature. We are going to start with the purrgil. Woo! Yes. And I'm starting there because it's my favorite. Okay, so once upon a time, I had the opportunity to work with marine mammals, and I absolutely loved being able to put some of my adventures with my old friends into stories in the bestiary. I tended to do those kinds of asides using Bait, who was our safari droid, and so there's a really cute little story from him where he's playing catch with a space whale. Just picture me and a dolphin, and that's what was happening in the real world. But Melissa, I understand you share my love of purrgil.
Yes, and I'm definitely not the only person on this panel. So we're going to start off by showing off the awesome pages from the book that S.T. wrote and Earyn illustrated. So we'll get into that. But then we've also got some real-world science to talk about. I love mashup creatures. And certainly in Rebels and then also in Ahsoka, I was looking at these like, okay, is it a whale? Is it more whale-like? Is it more squid-like? You know, because its tentacles coming out the back. I loved in Ahsoka sort of answered a lot of these questions, maybe not the way I thought they would go, but you know, we see the bones of the purrgil in Ahsoka, creating that huge like ring galaxy. So it's like, oh, okay, so that's much more like cetacean than you know, tentacles or whatever. But the way they open up back there, there's still, you know, a little bit of each of them. The other thing I thought was really interesting was in Rebels, there's sort of toothed whales. So here on Earth, there are toothed whales and there's baleen whales. It's one or the other, and it's the way they feed. So like a toothed whale, you know, like an orca or something like that will capture fish and, you know, eat them. Baleen whales just swallow a whole bunch of, or grab a whole bunch of water and then sieve it out, and then anything that's sort of caught there, they'll eat. You've seen Finding Nemo, you've seen things, you know, you've seen versions of this. But so the purrgil, I went back and found some concept art about the purrgil from Rebels, and like they weren't even necessarily teeth. They called them like nodes or nodules. So like maybe the original artist is thinking that these are actually what will capture the gas that they're feeding on, you know, get them to go to hyperspeed, those sorts of things. And I just interpreted them as teeth. And I think even in the bestiary,
I think we call them teeth.
Call them teeth. But then Ahsoka came out, so you didn't have access to Ahsoka when you were writing the book,
Star Wars
right?
is always growing. It's so fun.
So like, yeah. So all of a sudden in Ahsoka, I'm like, well, that's Bailey. That's totally different. So, you know, just these little things. I mean, there's different species. Maybe there's different species of purrgil. It's all fine, but I was definitely intrigued by that moment. Other thoughts from the panel?
Well, now just thinking about it, what if they go through different life phases where they go through having teeth things and then they metamorphose into baleen or the other way around? Or maybe it's just a factor of diet that the ones that, you know, strain, although we see the purrgil with teeth in Rebels kind of strain through a gas, so
Seems like a lot of work to change that. But there's species on Earth that go through bigger life cycle changes, certainly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Any other thoughts? Or other fun things about purrgil?
Did anyone see the porgal in Lego Star Wars?
No, I'm behind. I haven't watched Lego Star Wars again yet.
You should watch the new one, guys.
That's like my two favorite things. So.
Lego Rebuild the Galaxy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then there's also other parts about whales, and just what I really liked is, at least in Rebels, and I think it was just saying in Ahsoka, is that people just have this sense of wonder. You know, so even if you're in a galaxy far, far away, you see this creature, you're having this moment. And I mean, in Rebels, there's like literally talk of force sensitivity, and it's Ezra like actually having a moment. But if you've ever been on like a whale watching trip, or even just a boat trip when a whale shows up, you have that moment. Like, I work in oceanography, I go to sea, a couple months a year, and still every time I see a whale, I'm like, oh my God, and everybody like rushes out, people get out of bed, like, it's a moment. And so I sort of love that sense of awe is also, a similarity in the galaxy far, far away.
Well, and I like that they incorporate it too as a force experience. Like, there's this all-powerful being that just is sharing this immense energy with so many people, and to see Ahsoka stand there and just be in awe was really beautiful.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, there's also some thought about how big they are. So I know Sam has some thoughts about how that would work. How something that big, can it exist out in the vacuum of space? It seems sort of counterintuitive almost.
Yeah, I think about this a lot when you see creatures out in space in our favorite science fiction. It's like, how can they survive out there in the vacuum of space, in the extreme temperatures, with radiation bombarding them, those sorts of things. One thing we know about animals on Earth is that there's this really cool thing that is a surface area to volume ratio. So organisms that live in really, really cold climates tend to have a lower surface area to volume ratio, because then what ends up happening is they lose less temperature, right? So they get to keep their kind of core temperature warmer. So if you look at organisms, right, terrestrial animals that live on land, right? Bears that live in the Arctic Circle, polar bears, are much bigger than bears that you're going to see in the tropics, for example, like sun bears or moon bears. And same thing with marine mammals as well. Seals and sea lions, those that live in the Arctic or Antarctic, are much larger than those that live in more tropical areas like the Hawaiian monk seal and that sort of thing. So purrgil, this huge organism in space, like from that side, from that perspective, yeah, that makes sense to me. That small surface area to volume ratio.
How are they breathing in space? We talk about a little in here with respect to the gas and the absorption, but how are they breathing, and is there anything on our planet or something maybe nearby that might be breathing in the same way?
I mean, I thought about it just like whales, right? They live in the ocean and they have to come up to breathe, right? Like, they're holding their breath the whole time that they're, underwater. And so I was kind of wondering, since in Ahsoka we see them in atmosphere, it's like, do they come out of space in atmosphere, and then hold on to it for a couple of months or whatever while they travel to the next galaxy? Seems unlikely. I don't think that's what's happening, but I like that idea.
Well, if they can jump at light speed, it doesn't matter. Like, if it might not be months until they breathe again.
Right.
They can just go, jump, find another place, suck it all in, breathe out, do that a couple times.
Now I'm definitely thinking about Spaceballs, right? With the like giant vacuum, like I have a whole flock. What do you think?
I think we called it a pod.
Pod, okay.
There were like 3 names, but I know one of them was
Pod and purrgil show up in your atmosphere. Like, does that mess things up? Like, is everyone on that planet a little bit depleted then for a while?
Does anyone have anything else to add about purrgil, or should we move on?
Actually, can we get some purrgil in our atmosphere to take some of those greenhouse gases out?
That would be very helpful.
Filtered out.
There we go.
Leaves off of it. Yeah, I like that.
All right. Well, if there's one thing we know about tauntauns, it's that they smell bad on the outside. I'm going to turn this one over to our resident tauntaun expert, Sam, who's going to tell us a little bit about the cold weather creatures and hopefully explain why their scent might just be important to their survival.
Who loves tauntauns?
Yeah.
I know. I was once asked to make a tauntaun noise and it was terrible. one, so James doesn't have a better one. Thank you. Thank you, James. Yeah, I love them. Loved them since I first saw the original trilogy when I was a little kid. And I think something that if you've seen me on a panel or come speak to me in the booth, you'll hear me say this again and again because it's true. And it's one of those things that always makes me think when I'm out and about in nature, in that everything in nature, everything happens for a reason. Now, we may not know the reason as humans, and we can use science to figure it out, hopefully, over time. But everything you observe that's happening in nature, there is a reason for it. So every color, every scent, every sound, every pattern, every behavior, right? All of it, there's a reason for it. So having an awful scent, yeah, there's a reason for that. And in nature on planet Earth, there's usually one of two reasons, or both, for a scent. So who can think of a reason that an organism, either a plant or an animal, would want to have a scent? Raise your hand. All right. This young man right here, you want to shout it out? What do you think?
Like plants sometimes think to attract pollinators and flies.
I love it. Exactly. You want to attract something, right? So you want to attract, maybe you're releasing pheromones to attract a mate. Maybe you're releasing a scent to attract a pollinator, like you are a plant, which of course will help with your reproduction. It's not someone of the same species, right? So conversely to that, you release a scent to detract something. So something that might eat you, for example. Plants, they do both, right? They'll have a scent that is both telling pollinators, come to me, my nectar is delicious. You want to pollinate me. And it's also saying to herbivores, those animals that eat plants, don't eat my leaves. They're gross. They taste bitter. They're nasty, right? Don't eat these. So for tauntaun, we don't know why they make that scent. And scent is in the eye of the beholder, as they say. To other tauntauns, that scent may be delicious smelling. But it also might be like, hey, wampas, maybe I'm gross. You don't want to eat me. And then, of course, you have chemical warfare. That's kind of a third reason as well. It's a detractant. So skunks, for example, like, hey man, this scent is so bad that it'll make you sick. Like, it'll make you vomit. I don't know if anyone here has had the misfortune of being sprayed by a skunk, or having your dog sprayed by a skunk, for example. It can be so intense, like if it's really fresh, that it can actually make you throw up, like your body responds to it, right? So, yeah, so I don't know. I'm gonna postulate that maybe it's a little bit of both.
I'm just wondering that, Han is around Chewbacca all the time, and that, the Falcon's gotta smell like wet Wookiee sometimes, and that can't be good. So for Han to say something smells bad, it's probably really bad.
It's probably really bad.
I mean, what about diet, Sam? Do trash pandas smell like trash, right? I mean, it could just be something they're eating.
It could be something they're eating, sure.
I guess that seems unlikely on Han.
Yeah, I mean, so you can kind of think of tauntauns, I like to think of them as like the caribou or reindeer, same thing, right? Of Hoth. And those guys during deep winters, right, what they do is they need a certain amount of bulk to break through the ice. So they'll kind of like paw at the ice to get to lichen and dead grasses underneath the ice to eat to kind of sustain themselves through the winter. So I'm guessing it's maybe a similar diet if they're herbivores for tauntauns, and lichen and grasses don't really speak that much.
Well, I put together this, horrifying slide of snake piles. So let's at least quickly get to that topic about that. I remember being a kid and seeing Empire Strikes Back and being like, if that's a cold weather species on this planet, how come it dies of exposure? Like, that seems counterintuitive to me, but that's true here on Earth for some animals, right?
Yeah. Well, I love that because I think tauntauns, and ST, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't they reptomammals?
I think they are, yeah.
Yeah, which is confusing to me because mammals and reptiles they're quite different from each other, right? Like, so reptiles in general are what we call ectotherms, except for one type of reptile, which are birds. Do you know birds are reptiles? They're the weirdos of the reptile world. But ectotherms are basically that, if you've heard the term cold-blooded, right? So they get their energy from warm rocks, warm bodies if they're on you, or the sun. And then mammals, of course, we're endotherms, so we heat our bodies from the inside. And so you don't see a lot of reptiles, right, in really, really cold climates because guess what? There's not a lot of sun out there, it's very cold, it's hard for them to survive. Except there are a few here on planet Earth. So for example, there are some snakes that live up in Canada, right? And what they do is they actually join forces to survive the cold winter. So they will find a cave or an abandoned mine, something like that, and they'll ball up together, right? Freeze almost virtually solid for the winter. They go into a torpor, so their metabolism slows way down, right? They almost freeze entirely solid. And then as the spring thaw comes, they slowly start to wake up, they unfreeze, and they're very sluggish and very cold, very slow moving, but the friction of them moving against each other in this big snake ball actually begins to warm each other's bodies up. They warm up and warm up and warm up and warm up until they break apart and then slither out and go their separate ways and enjoy their little snaky life out there.
And then in addition to snakes being able to do that, there are also a couple of toad-headed agama species that were recently found a couple of years ago up in the high mountains of Peru. And so this is the highest elevation lizard species found at about 5,400 feet above sea level. And they do something kind of similar where in their natural history, they also can go into that torpor state. And for whatever reason, they can just totally freeze over and then come back to life. Once all the snow and the ice begins to thaw and they start to heat up and warm up, and like Sam was saying, start to move, and that friction of them moving against each other really helps them to continue to wake up. So we do have these completely extreme animals that live in the real world with us today as well.
So you guys, nature and science, it's like magic but real.
All right, so Randy is our expert in dinosaurs, and by default, he is our expert on the almighty varactyl. Randy, can you tell us a little bit about the types of plumage a creature like a varactyl would have and what function that might provide in the natural world?
Yeah, so when I think of plumage, we think obviously of birds, and so birds will use their feathers for things like insulation. Obviously, birds will use their primary feathers also for flight. To me, when I look at varactyl, it definitely has much more lizard-like features. It has that kind of sprawled posture. So it seems to me like in the Star Wars world that the kind of line between lizards and things that we consider more to be dinosaur-like is kind of blurred. But yeah, looking specifically at the plumage, I think of Utapau, the planet where varactyl lives, where it originated from. It looks like a pretty hot, desolate kind of place. So I wouldn't think that it would be using its plumage for insulation necessarily. It also doesn't really look like it uses it for flight. So to me, when I think of varactyl, I think of tropical birds today that might use their plumage for things like communication or things like sexual selection, right? They have these very brightly colored feathers that they can use to communicate with each other. And so yeah, I think of that when I think of the varactyl. I know they're described as being kind of almost community-like animals that have almost semi-sentience to each other. So maybe they're using that as this kind of species identification to form these varactyl communities.
But do they do weird little dances like many of the tropical birds do for mating? Look this up.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I really hope so. This is why we need the bestiary for good questions like this.
What about loyalty? I know that a lot of reptiles are very loyal. Is that something you think, or not a lot of, I know that the varactyl is very loyal to Obi-Wan. Do you think that a lot of reptiles in the wild would share that trait, or do you feel like loyalty is maybe more of a mammalian characteristic?
So let's see, I'm sure that Erin can give a better answer in regard to reptiles, so lizards and things like that specifically. I think of things in terms of dinosaurs. So in the Jurassic Park media, we have the raptors, right? Those are the most kind of famous dinosaurs, one of the most famous dinosaurs that people think of. And in those movies, they're depicted as being pack hunters, right? These very loyal, almost like wolf-like kind of pack hunters. And in the modern world, there isn't actually a large precedent for that among the kind of descendants of dinosaurs, so archosaurs, things like birds and crocodilians. And there's also recently work done by doing things kind of in my area of things with geochemistry by studying, again, the chemical composition of dinosaur teeth from a theropod dinosaur, like the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park called Deinonychus, where they looked at carbon isotopes in the teeth in order to see whether adults and juveniles had similar isotopic compositions that would be indicative of whether or not they were hunting in packs like this. And they found them to be pretty distinct, which actually suggested to them that those dinosaurs may not have had that same kind of pack hunting structure that they're depicted like in movies. So if you think of theropod dinosaurs or like dromaeosaurs or raptors specifically as being these like wolf analogs, the way they're depicted as sometimes. Not a lot of evidence for that right now, looking at things like geochemistry that I kind of deal in. So fractals might be unique in that regard, that they have this sort of almost.
That is really amazing that you can determine behavior from the rock composition of their teeth.
Yeah, that's wild. I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
Thank you for letting me ask you all about that in the hallway.
Yeah, if you want the deep dive version of it,
Because
come by
you
the
mentioned it like a week ago, and I said, okay, so we're gonna have to have a long conversation because I don't understand and I would like to understand, and I don't fully understand, but find him in the hallway afterwards because he explained it really well, so I think you're really gonna like it.
Can I make a rebuttal to this a little bit?
Okay, yeah.
Well, just think, you look at extinct animals, right? And I look at extant, so still living animals. And if you look at those reptiles, those weird reptiles, birds, right? They are quite loyal to one another.
That is true.
And anyone who's ever owned a parrot, right, knows that they bond with one or two specific people, and like that is their flock, right? So, same thing with raptors. Many of them mate for life. So. I don't know. This is an open question,
That is
right?
very true.
Depending if we're looking at extinct, extent,
Yeah, we
and
also-
what Star Wars creatures
Yeah.
are more like.
And then I also have a quick point to add in that there's a lot of research being done now on reptile, for the lack of a better word, like emotions. So like for the most part, people tend to think, like we look at an animal and we see like a dog and we're like, oh, when you come home, the dog is happy to see you, and we're giving those animals human emotions. And so we definitely have to measure those things a little bit differently when it comes to, well, for all animals in general, but then especially with reptiles. And because if anyone has like a pet lizard or a pet snake, sometimes those animals will be okay with you handling them, but if somebody else were to try to handle them, it would be an absolute not. That animal is going to bite you. Just put the food in the cage, and I will handle them further from there when I get home. And so, we have to kind of expand our thinking of what it means to be loyal outside of just like that human perspective of okay, well, I'm loyal in the sense of I will allow you to feed me and to clean out my cage, and I won't bite you. Maybe I will give you a little nibble. I just won't bite you as hard as somebody else, like a stranger and things like that. So there's research being done, but in general also, when we say wild animals are pretty much not going to be loyal to anybody. They might come up and allow you to feed them, but eventually you probably might get bit by that animal as well. So wild animals, not loyal. Pets, maybe.
Well, Erin, since you are our resident on all things reptile, may we ask you a bit about the crepe dragon, please? Okay. So what do you find to be most interesting about that species? And do you know of any earthbound reptiles that exhibit behavior or traits that might be similar to a crate?
Yeah, I think that just their sheer size is really interesting. And then also the fact that they can spit venom. So one of my favorite lizard facts is that here in the United States, we actually do have a venomous lizard. It's called the Gila monster. It's this really beautiful, medium-sized lizard that is orange and black, and it has, instead of your traditional scales that you might think of, it has these beaded scales, so they look like the actual beads on the lizard. And they're really similar to the crepe dragon in the sense of that they do actually spend about 80% of their lives underground, and just like crepe dragons go in and eat the sarlacc and go into their burrows and live there. Gila monsters do live in the burrows of other animals, and they don't spit venom, and for the most part you don't have to worry about them biting you because they are a little bit faster than you would think of a chunky lizard like that. They're not going to just do this. Now, if you go and you mess with them and and you try to like pick them up and stuff like that, then they might bite you. But their venom is not nearly as strong as the great dragons in the sense of if a Gila monster bites you and it envenomates you, then you go to the hospital, you get some anti-venom, and you're fine. If you're in the Star Wars universe, you probably won't be. So we're in the right place here.
Well, and Erin, I realize I set up this slide maybe in a confusing way. The top ones there are the ones that the pictures you gave me that with venomous bites.
Yes.
But since we were talking about spitting, I'm worried that the lower picture maybe is confusing. Can you tell me why you sent me those lower
Okay,
ones?
yes. So I also sent the lower ones because the crate dragon can make like this really nice pearl. And so there are no real lizard species that can make a pearl. However, lizards in general tend to get their water from the food that they eat. So in the bottom photos, we have a marine iguana, and then also, and that was the bottom right, and then on the bottom left, we have the chugwalin. So what some lizard species do is that they sneeze out salt. So if you're eating insects, or if like the marine iguana, you're eating a lot of kelp, you're getting a lot of salt in your body, they don't sweat. So how are they gonna make sure that they don't die from an overdose of salt? They have to spit that out, and sometimes their snot actually just blows back on them, and so they end up getting beads of salt on their faces and on their bodies, and that's kind of what turns them white. And so that was the closest that I could get us to the crate dragon pearl.
No, but I love the idea that out in the like dunes of Tatooine, you know, this pearl is so coveted, and it turned out it's just like a salt ball or something. Exactly. So that's what I'm hoping. So, you know, if you get around to it, write that into the next one,
We'll
S.T.
work that out. That would be really great. So James.
Just the idea of it being a giant salt snot, that the salt can actually be really useful in some cultures because
Yeah.
there's no source of salt sometimes.
Right? Absolutely.
James, I know that you're a big fan of the Acklay, and our bestiary narrator, Artisan Tekka, describes it as an amphibious reptilian crustacean because she was verbose that day. What makes them unique in their combination of all of those physical traits, and what do you love about them? And also, where can we find some in our world? Not Acklays.
Where can we find some aclays in our world? That's
Yeah, is there
a
kind of
good question.
similar
In case you
might
need
be
to
able
like
find?
So,
James Bond
yeah.
some, you know.
So, the aclay, as you can see, it looks like a combination of a whole bunch of things. It's kind of like a praying mantis. It's kind of like a giant crab with its claws that are also spears. So it's kind of a bit of a insect, arachnid, and it's got huge teeth. It shrieks, which is something that kind of is unique. That at least I hope there's not a whole lot of shrieking insects that are about to bite you and then they'll
I
shriek.
hope not to.
But if you look at the praying mantis here, it has kind of spiky claws that are very, very similar. That they go in, but they also have that little hook. Just the way that the front claws on the aclay have that extra little thumb for grasping. And you can see that in the movie that it can bite onto things and slightly grasp things, but it also just uses them to stab. Always fun. So, it's really cool. And, one of the things we mentioned earlier is how do things get big? And, we've learned in cold environments, they get big because of their surface area to mass ratio. But for insects, in the periods of, even before dinosaurs, insects got really, really big. And that was in a consequence, I think, or it was an added benefit of having such a high oxygen content in the atmosphere that you think that, it would be the exoskeleton can only get so big before their weight collapses, but in a slightly different atmosphere, one with a higher oxygen content, that it allowed for such things to grow really big, which is probably good for the rest of us, honestly.
See, I do really want to hear about all of the work, briefly about the work that went into this, and you mentioned, Sam Tekka, a little bit about the premise of the book and how, what it's like in the universe and how you decided to set that up and create some characters.
Well, we got to use a vehicle that existed in the Star Wars universe called the Galactic Society of Creature Enthusiasts. And so what we
will
did,
found, and we must make this.
we would very much like to have a Galactic Society. Please join us. We'll figure it out. But essentially, this organization was founded during the High Republic era to catalog the new creatures that were being discovered with all of the hyperspace travel, to protect the organic members of the society from the things they were discovering. They use these little safari droids, and we have a safari droid in the bestiary. His name is Bait, B-A-T-5, because of course we have to have a cute little name for a droid, and artists would use Bait as bait to go out and lure the creatures in, collect the data, and then she would sketch them in her sketchbook, and they would compile all of their information into a text. So it was really exciting for us to create someone who had a new job in Star Wars. We made her the creature cartographer, because she had been a hyperspace traveler in her youth with her family, and she was just not that into travel. Or she was into travel, but not into travel for hyperspace lane discovery. She wanted to travel to find animals. And so she took her family job and pivoted a little and created a new vocation for herself, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, I want to be a creature cartographer.
I do. All right, so why don't we segue into lightning round?
Okay.
I think I will just say an animal and a scientist, and we will say Melissa, porgs, go.
Okay, porgs are best. I love porgs. I got to interview the concept artist who designed porgs, so I've got some of his early sketches here while he was trying to figure it out with J.J. Abrams, what they would be like. So some more seal-like things, more bat-like things, you can kind of see. They had to do this because of all the puffins and other breeding seabirds off this island in Ireland where they were filming. And so it was just kind of a fun, make it Star Wars. And so just quickly, the biggest difference between them and puffins is this big, honkin' bill that puffins have, where they use it to catch a bunch of fish. They also use it to burrow, which you can kind of see in the background here. That's where so they nest underground, because there's other like avian predators and stuff like that. And so in the concept art, you don't see any in the movie, I don't think, but there are these sort of other avian predators. And so the fact that porgs don't have a bill and they nest on cliffs and sort of out in the open means that they have to have some other defense, right? Some other way to protect their nest. So either they're total jerks and like bite, or another thing that some birds do is poop all over their eggs so that they're stinky, back to the tauntaun discussion. So I just love this. Like, this off screen, we don't see it, but definitely on Octo, there's just porg poop all over everything. It's very stinky.
And possibly the falcon as well.
Right, yes,
Right.
probably true. Yeah, and invasive species, like if you go to Batu, right, in the Galaxy's Edge, they're everywhere. That's a whole, system collapse potentially there. So we can get into that. Anyone has more questions? All right.
Sam.
Starlocks. Starlocks are weird, y'all. So one thing that I'm thinking about animals in space. I'm like, how do they survive the vacuum and the pressure, or not the pressure, the vacuum and the cold temperatures and the radiation in space? There is an animal that does survive space. It's called a tardigrade, otherwise known as a water bear. It's up there or not. And how they do it, maybe this is how Sarlacc do it, because Sarlacc, right, they release their sperm and their eggs. I think they're probably broadcast spawners, so they kind of release that out into the, like a whole bunch of them, millions of them, right, out into space, and then they just float around, meet up with each other, find a host, land on the host, and then start a new life cycle. But they have to survive that space, right? So tardigrades, they go into something called cryptobiosis. So what it is they, all the moisture comes out of their cells and they replace it with a sugar that's like in crystalline form. They also create a protein that shields their DNA from radiation. And they slow down into this complete dormant state. They dry out, right, desiccate, slow down into a dormant state until they reach kind of a moist environment again. So this is what I'm thinking is probably happening with the Starlacc spores out in space, some sort of similar mechanisms.
I did not know about the sugar bees. I love talking to these guys. They're so neat.
Yeah, it's fun. And we do something actually similar in a lab. So when you freeze bacteria at negative 80°C, right? If there's water in there, what happens with water when it freezes? It expands, right? So it can lyse or bust the cells open, right? So you actually have to put glycerol, which is another type of sugar or alcohol in there, which will prevent them from lysing. So there you go.
Thank you, Sam. Hey, James, I'm feeling like maybe you want to talk about porgs.
Oh,
James with the gourd.
Hello. I just wanted to say that don't go out into space without a suit because you might get Sarlacc spores all over you, and that's gross.
Let's talk about gorgs. Gorgs are basically the frogs of the Star Wars galaxy that are kind of just, if you're on a planet and there's something frog-like, it might also be called a gorg. You see them in Phantom Menace. Jar Jar tries to steal one off of the vendor stand, and then ones like this guy are found in Star Wars Resistance. So there's a lot of different things, they can metamorphose. If you saw Star Wars Resistance, you find out that someone about this size is just the young, and they can get very, very, very big. But they go through a lot of changes, and so they can come out in lots of different ways, lots of colors, lots of body types, just like the way that we have lots of different camouflage types between toads and frogs on Earth. And can survive in all kinds of environments, from deserts to oceans. So really, and they're probably also an indicator species throughout the galaxy that if gorgs aren't healthy, like when frog populations decline on Earth, it's kind of an indication that the habitat area itself is in decline. And so if you're on different planets, check out the gorgs, and who knows, they can talk to you.
Thank you, James and Gorg.
You're welcome.
Hey, Erin, dewbacks are such an icon of Star Wars. As our reptile expert, what would you like to say about them?
I think that they are really cool in the sense that they have their hairs on them that have that capillary action that they can get the water from. And then there's also a species down in Australia called the Thorny devil, which has something really similar as in that in its scales it can kind of absorb the water and then push it forward. So even if it's coming, like if it's raining and the water is on its tail, its skin has these little microscopic grooves of them. Think of them like tiny little tubes that actually forces the water down from their tail or up from their tails and into their face, so that way that these desert dwelling animals are able to actually drink the water.
That's amazing. Okay. Okay. Randy is our dinosaur guy, and I am personally terrified of Pocovi because they remind me of velociraptors and compysaurs and other things that would definitely try to kill me. I think that we incorporate a little bit of chicken lore into these guys because Iris and I are really into chickens. But would these creatures be similar to the things that terrify me in Jurassic Park? And do you have any information about them that maybe might make people like me less afraid?
So one thing that I love to think about with dinosaurs is thinking about them as real animals that were alive at one point, right? So, we commonly see them in popular media as being these kind of monsters that are out to get you and things like that. So one thing that could maybe help you with not being so afraid of them is just thinking of them as regular wild animals, like animals that we have today. So like the Peekabee takes, I think, inspiration, at least to me visually, from so there's a couple of dinosaurs that I think of when I think of the Peekabee. So on the left there, I think, is the pelican amynus. So that is a dinosaur that, get pretty much what it says in the tin. It is a pelican mimic, and that name is based on preservation of what we've interpreted potentially as being this gular sac. So kind of like almost a pouch that looks reminiscent again of the modern pelican, which I just think is delightfully goofy looking. And so that helps me to find them a little bit more cute. Unless, like there's that video of a pelican trying to eat a capybara, which is also hilarious. If you're a capybara, then maybe not. And then another thing that helps me to think about dinosaurs as real living animals is thinking about all of the kind of diverse ecological niches that they were able to fulfill over the millions of years, hundreds of millions of years that dinosaurs lived on the Earth. So that image on the right there, above and below, is a type of dromaeosaur dinosaur. So this is again relatives of like the raptors that you would expect to see in movies, that we think actually had adaptations for a semi-aquatic habitat. So it had that very gracile, almost kind of like waterfowl-like body plan. We think even like the replacement of teeth in the front of the jaws might have been delayed to allow it to have these kind of powerful biting teeth in the front that we see reminiscent of animals that are piscivorous, or animals that eat fish in the modern world. So thinking about these animals as being inspired by real-life creatures, to me, makes them more kind of awe-inspiring, almost like you're saying, rather than something that inspires fear, like a movie monster.
I will work on
on that, thank you.
I think we have time for a couple of audience questions.
Yes,
right?
yeah, yes, we have 4 minutes. So any audience questions, any animals you want to ask us?
We got a
questions
microphone
about?
up front.
Oh, yeah, or, yeah, there you go.
Hi. So my question is for you, and it's about the internal temperature of the reptomammalian tauntauns. We all know that the internal temperature is lukewarm, but what exactly is lukewarm? I need to know that because I have a nephew that I'm going to have to start helping to bathe, and I want to make sure not to scald them. So, what exactly is lukewarm?
Ooh, lukewarm. I mean, I don't know, it's subjective. Because this is the best dad joke I've heard today, by the way. But yeah, so clearly that's the mammal part of this rectomammal, right? If it's warm, so it's endothermic. I would say, let's say, if you're looking at birds, they're reptiles, but they tend to run hotter than humans do. Humans are like 96 something Fahrenheit, so maybe 75 degrees. Something like that.
We also say like modern ones in our friends, the relatives of sloths, have very like slow metabolic rates that can get some of the lowest body temperatures, so decently down into below just 30 degrees Celsius for birds in our friends is kind of the lower limit that I think we would expect to see.
All right, we got 2 more questions.
Okay, just throwing on to that, they did prove on Mythbusters that you could actually stay warm by being inside a dead tauntaun overnight.
There we go. Love the Mythbusters. Always have an answer for everything. All right, next.
One quick comment. The scholarships that you're providing, thank you for that. Those are amazing.
Kind of piggyback riding off his question. Basically, do you think those possibly could be heterotherms instead of like maybe just endotherm? They could possibly like use both the environmental and also make their own body heat.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And you want to come join me on this panel?
Right, yeah, exactly. Let's talk about this more.
Fantastic point.
Do you have a question?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, it's actually something that I just thought of during this panel is, do purrgils and sarlaccs have a symbiotic relationship where if sarlaccs release their, seeds out in the universe, and then purrgils, if they do have to visit planets to breed, could drop off the sarlaccs on these different planets, so.
Yeah. So are there species that like help with the reproductive cycle, I guess, of other species, whether knowingly or unknowingly?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you said this panel made you think of that.
Yeah, it just made me think of that. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I mean,
Or
whales probably
parasitic.
do, right? Like whales definitely,
parasitic.
yeah, I would say whales definitely have lice on them. So I mean, probably, right?
And then also plants are the obvious one.
Right.
You have your pollinators bringing the pollen, so that way you can create your seeds and then continue to grow. So that's a quick connection there.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
All you nerds, we love you.
Hey
guys.
wait, yeah, which is 12:50, so if you can ask it real quick.
Okay,
go,
okay.
but-
Every time I come to a panel like this, I feel like I chose the wrong profession.
Never too late.
Mechanical engineer. Minox. I know this is probably a bigger question,
Oh,
but
yeah. All right.
creatures that actually feed off of mechanical, electrical energy.
Yeah.
Do we have creatures that are similar to that?
All right, well, we have to get off the stage, but, well, the next few are here, but yes.
Yes, there's bacteria that basically absorb electricity.
Yeah, exactly. We did talk about it in an episode of Star Wars Bestiary. I don't remember which one, but yes, absolutely, that's a thing. And silicone-based light as well. All right. So,
Extreme Files episode, I think, number 4.
Thanks for coming out, and check out, we made some wildlife documentaries as well, too.